Hi, everyone, and welcome to Tap Into Your Creativity. I am so excited to have Bethany Kohrt joining us today. I'm going to be bringing her in all the way from the UK. And I cannot wait for you to meet her. She's going to tell us all about herself and the incredible artist that she is. And there she is.
Hi.
Hi, Bethany. Welcome.
Thank
Thank you so much for being here and being a part of my army of artists. And you are just an incredible human being that I've gotten to know in the last few months. And I couldn't be happier and prouder for you to join me today.
Oh, Sandra, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it. And honestly, you are the amazing human being. This work that you do with Feeding America is just absolutely incredible. What is it, $33,000 you've raised already?
Yeah, it's
Wow.
a little more actually now. It's kind of crazy. It's really humbling, and it feels really good that as a community of artists, we are able to feed a lot of people in need, and it feels like every time that I think of maybe doing something different, the need is so strong here, and the more we can help, the better it will be. So you make it happen together with all the incredible artists that have joined Tap Into Your Creativity. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's absolutely fabulous to be here. I think it's a great model. It's a win for everyone. Um, I get to donate something to a cause that's fantastic. Someone buys a painting that they perhaps otherwise wouldn't have come across, and somebody out there gets, the acknowledgement that they deserve and something on their plates,
Yes.
meal. And
Yes.
that's
And
amazing.
I also have to say thank you for our collectors, because without them, this wouldn't work. So I always say thank you. And I always also say it's not me, but it's we. And so anyways, welcome to the program, and I can't wait to, just dig in with you. And I would love for you to start from the very beginning. Where were you born? And tell us a little bit about your childhood, if you can.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. So I live in England, in the southwest of England, and I was born here, but my parents then lived in Hong Kong, which at the time was a British colony. And so all my brothers and sisters were born there, but I just happened to be born in August, so I was born here. But my parents have been there for a long time, so we had a long family history of being in Hong Kong. And I had my whole childhood there, actually. So I was in Hong Kong for 20 years. Sorry, my screen keeps going off.
In Hong Kong,
In Hong
really?
Yeah, absolutely. So although I was born here, it was really Hong Kong that was home to me for the first 2 decades of my life. And it had a very profound effect on, my art now and, the person that it shaped me to be. It is no longer a colony, and it's a very different place now than it was then. But we lived, right at the top of a big mountain, and it was like all jungle. And people, I think, who've never been to Hong Kong imagine it to be this, just the really dense urban place. But it's an archipelago of, I think, about 1,000 islands or something. So it's just like zillions and zillions of islands. And it's very, very beautiful, very natural, very beautiful. We used to go out on boats. My father was a professional sailor, so we used to go out on his boat. We'd go fishing, we'd go sailing, we'd just basically spent our entire lives in this subtropical boating dream. It was quite amazing when you think about it now.
Wow.
And so
It must have been incredible to live in Hong Kong. Wow.
I mean, it sometimes feels like a bit of a dream now, because I haven't really been back that much in my life. My father left in '97 when it was handed over back to China, because he was a government official, or he was in the police. So we had to leave, and quite rightly. And so we did. And I haven't been back many times. I've been back, I think, 3 times or twice. I can't remember. So it's weird. It was this sort of bubble of my life that I haven't really revisited. So I have a very rose-tinted, very romanticized recollection of my time in Hong Kong. And I think that shows up in my art all the time.
Were you, at the time, were you interested in the art world or design or any of that?
I mean, I was all I ever wanted to do was draw and paint. I mean, I was sort of in that camp of art that just kind of grew up. You know, I was born with a crayon in my hand. But I wouldn't say I was particularly aware of art or the art world as such growing up. Not really, no. I was always aware of, in Hong Kong, it's just amazing, you know, you're surrounded by these incredible textiles and, you know, Chinese furniture and paintings, and the decorative arts in Hong Kong are just so present and so beautiful. I think everybody is aware of that, you know, amazing carved furniture and all the beautiful prints and calligraphy and all the decorative stuff is, you can't escape. But I don't think I was aware of art as a formal thing, no.
And did you, I mean, I'm sure Hong Kong is a very international place, so I'm sure, did you have friends from all over? Did you go to an international school? How did that work?
Yeah, I mean, it was still colony times when we lived there, so it was an English-speaking international school that I went to. And I came to boarding school in England for my secondary, what do you call it, from middle school, I guess. So it was a bit kind of mixed up with some time in England, but being a boarding school in England, I didn't spend much time in England. I just came to school here and then went back to Hong Kong. So it was very international. You know, international in Hong Kong really means international. I mean, kids from just all over. I think in my class, English was spoken, but I think Cantonese was spoken by all the Hong Kong Chinese kids. But otherwise there were, you know, Indians, Koreans, Americans, you know, kids from Hawaii, I remember, New Zealanders, Australians. I'm just absolutely everywhere you could think of. It really was phenomenally international.
Did you learn a second language?
So we spoke Cantonese a bit growing up. My father spoke quite well. It's a very difficult language to learn.
Yeah, very.
But I don't mind admitting I was born in the 70s. And back then there wasn't any British television. There was very little television at all. I think there were only 2 terrestrial channels. And they were Cantonese. So we grew up listening to Cantonese on the TV and around and stuff like that. And my dad had to speak a lot for work. Not, I think, to a great standard, but yeah, we did understand it. And now I've kind of returned to it a little bit. So I've got a Cantonese app on my phone, and sometimes I try and remember how to ask for certain things. But don't ask me to speak any Cantonese now.
I won't. I won't understand you, so I won't. So what year then did you move back, and then where were you at that time?
So we left in 97. Which was when I turned 20. So I was going to art school at that point. So I went to art school in London, what used to be the London Institute and is now the University of the Arts in London or something like that. So I went to Camberwell College then. So I was studying for my art foundation year at that. So I was ready to sort of settle myself back over in the UK. And 2 of my sisters stayed, and my brother and I, Kate, stayed in to remain in the UK. We just felt, I think my brother and I felt more English, and I think they felt more like they wanted to just stay in Hong Kong. So they stayed, and it was a funny thing.
Oh.
How, you know, we just divided ourselves according to what we were doing. But we were all in our 20s. I'm the youngest of 4, and I was 20. So, you know, we were able to make our own decisions. So I was deeply entrenched in art school and all of that stuff in London. And the Hong Kong government had stopped paying for our flights back to Hong Kong, so I therefore couldn't afford to go back. So I didn't for a very long time.
And your siblings, did you see them?
So we ended up seeing much less of each other, really. So both my sisters stayed in Hong Kong for a very long time. They're now in Australia, and my brother and I are here. So it was a strange divide, you know.
Wow.
Each to their own, you know. When you grow up in a very international place like that, there aren't any guarantees that you're all going to stick together, or, you know, we didn't grow up with that family home. Yeah, I guess we sort of splintered off into our own directions.
I think your parents gave you the liberty to choose too. I mean, I think that's what you're saying. Like, you grew up in a place where, you know, everything was accepted, which is very fortunate for you.
Right. And we were adults at that point. I mean, we were out of my parents' wallet, you know, away from they were not paying. So we had to decide what we wanted to do. And I was at art school, so I just stuck with that. And I was happy in London. So for a long time.
So after you went to school for art, did you graduate with a fine art degree then?
No, so I did the foundation London, and then I went to Newcastle University, which is in the north of England, and I studied fine art there. My whole journey with art school was really, it just sort of felt like a bit of a non-starter from the beginning. So I started doing sculpture, and in my second out of 3 years, they closed the sculpture department. So it wasn't great. I was in the middle of, I'd finished my second year, and then they were saying, well, you're going to have to change to painting or something, which at the time, I know I'm a painter now, but at the time, I didn't feel like I could paint at all, didn't know what I was doing. So I decided instead, they gave me the option to do history of art and just cut my losses with fine art. So I graduated with a history of art degree, which was really disappointing actually, because I had loved fine art and that was what I had always wanted to do. But I didn't feel able to go into my final year of a degree in a discipline that I literally never done at art school. So I'd done sculpture the entire way through. So I decided to cut my losses, and the whole thing was just so disappointing because I don't know, I think perhaps I might have continued with it for a bit longer, or I don't know, but it didn't work out, sadly.
Do you think now, though, looking back, having that art history degree has helped you throughout your career?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it might have been, I don't know. I mean, I'm glad I did it in many ways because I enjoyed the academic side of things and I loved learning about art history, and I have just tons of books, and if I'm sitting around, I've got nothing to do, there are tons of art books and I'm reading it, learning to look at modern art, and, I'm always reading stuff about art. So I don't think it was in any way wasted time. I'm really glad I did it. I think in some ways I would have just loved to have graduated with a fine art degree. It just would have kind of ticked that box because I did 3 years of the work, but didn't, it was a bit of a funny, it was a sort of funny old time. But, when you're at that age, you don't really know what you're doing and you're just kind of doing it all by the seat of your pants. And I couldn't help the fact that they closed the sculpture department, really.
So what did you do right after? What do you do with that degree?
So I went off and I was trying to sort of paint for a bit, and I think it just, it's hard to pay the bills, when you first leave university. I think I was 23, something like that. And I moved back to London, and London is expensive, like super, super expensive. So you kind of have to make a decision about what you're going to do. And so I got a job just working in offices and stuff like that, just to pay the bills. And then, the years roll by, and I was painting or whatever I was doing, drawing less and less. I did continue with life drawing all my life. So in London, I went to an art school in the evenings, always. But no, I kind of drifted away, and then I ended up doing another degree in a sort of a medical subject. I don't know, I sort of lost connection with the whole art thing. I think I felt a little bit disillusioned. I went to art school in the 90s during the, the young British, movement, and it was very conceptual. And, if you were not making, I don't know, wild sculptures made out of barbed wire that were, 25 feet tall and genitalia or something shocking and set on fire, like, you're not an artist. And I was there like, but I just quite want to make a bust of someone or a portrait or something like that. So I think that left me feeling very disillusioned. It was like, how do I A, pay the rent, and B, prostitute myself doing something that I just have no real interest in doing? I think had it been a bit more aesthetic at that time, I might have got along with it better, or perhaps moved into painting, or thought about commercial avenues for the drawings that I was making. But it was so conceptual and so mad, it was all Damien Hirst and his, pickled sharks. And I didn't know what to do with that. I was young. It didn't speak to me at all. Still doesn't, actually.
I can understand. It's very romanticized in a way that we all feel when we go to art school, that, you have to follow a certain path. And I think things have changed for the new students coming in. I think there's more realistic courses on business and marketing and what it really means to be a fine art, professional.
I hope so, because I think it's, I think unrealistic is exactly the right word. Just, it's so unrealistic, you go
It really is. It really is.
you know, delving deep into the stuff that, you know, and in my case, I wasn't even interested in it really. It was just the teachers, the tutors or whatever decided that was the kind of, that was the leaning of the art world at the time. And that, you know, you did that or that was it kind of thing. So it wasn't, you know, it wasn't good for me. It was a bit of a graveyard. And I'm not surprised really that I wandered off and started doing other things, because I thought I'll never pay the rent with this stuff. And I don't really want to do this kind of art, you know. I felt like it was a sort of a guilty secret to go out with a sketchbook and a pencil and, you know, sketch a landscape. I felt like it was my sort of, I was terribly insipid and irrelevant and that sort of, you know, art of a bygone era.
But I think that, I mean, the most important thing that I'm listening to you is that you actually listen to yourself and you didn't follow a path because everyone was trying to do that. So I think that has a lot of value.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm just putting my more grown-up self onto my more, because I think at the time I felt a little bit kind of paralyzed by it all. But I did carry on doing life drawing classes, and I did carry on doing the things that interested me. And I did that throughout all my life. I've, you know, for years I went to the Royal Drawing School in London every Thursday for their drawing evenings, and I loved it. So I guess in a way I kind of stuck to what I enjoyed, and I didn't try and pursue something that wasn't me. But it meant I didn't really make art for a long time.
Yeah.
So there were a couple of decades there where I wasn't committed in any way, shape or form. And I took up lots of sort of creative pursuits. You know, I was doing other things and making stuff and, you know, do pottery classes, but it was all very non-committal and hobby stuff, which is fine, but it wasn't really, I wasn't making art, no.
So what happened and when did it happen?
So becoming an artist, you mean, or?
Yeah, what happened? What happened in your professional and personal life that made you decide to maybe, you know, really dip yourself into something new?
Right. Well, I mean, it was a sort of a whole combination of different things, really. I met my now husband, who's German, and I decided to move to Germany to be with him. And the job I was doing at the time wasn't really allowed, even though it was part of the European Union at the time, it wasn't really a job that was allowed or permitted. So it sort of forced me, once children came along, it sort of forced me into a domestic role, which I don't think either of us had ever really anticipated for me, but it was just kind of, that was how it went. So we were like, you know, great, we've got small kids, I'll be at home for a while, not forever, but. And I found it really hard. I really didn't want to be at home. I have a lot of energy, and I think just, you know, being a mum is amazing, but I didn't want to be a mum 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You know, I wanted to be able to have some creative outlet. So I was very frustrated. I don't mind admitting we were living in Berlin, and it's such a cool place. So much, you know, art, creativity, so much energy there, and I just felt frustrated that I wasn't part of it. So I guess there was sort of this buzz around me where I was starting to think, okay, I need to start doing something. And I think, you know, as the kids became toddlers, you know, we'd sit around the kitchen table, you know, making little finger paintings and potato prints and whatever. And then I'd start doing more ambitious stuff with them and printing, and I'd cut out lino cuts and stuff like that. And then I'd suddenly find myself thinking, gosh, I'm going to go to the art store and get some proper rollers for them, and then get some better paint. And sometimes I'd just find that we'd be sitting around the table and they would have got bored and left, and I'd still be sitting there painting. And I started to think, gosh, I'm loving this. I'm just absolutely loving this energy. And of course, my husband could see it miles before. He was like, okay, so you have this problem that you don't have a job and that you're bored, and then you have this amazing passion of, you know, art making. What could we do? I was like, no, I need to apply for a job, and I need to, I just couldn't, I don't know, it took me ages to sort of put the two together. But I did eventually, my big thick head eventually kind of said, oh, right, perhaps making art is a good idea. So I started buying some canvases and some bits and pieces, and I started to play with those. But I was very tired of these portraits and these very realistic drawings I've been doing for years, you know, hyper accurate and all that kind of stuff. They felt so lifeless to me. And I was so attracted to abstract art, but didn't really know how to go about it. So I just started, really, I suppose, in about 2015, 2016, something like that. But it just quickly became obvious that I didn't know what I was doing, and I had a this, you know, wonderful idea of what I wanted. And I'd been to art school, so I should know, but I didn't. And it was this sort of, you know, this chasm between what I wanted for my art and what I was able to achieve. And so Q Nicholas Wilton came along, and I did CVP in 2019. And that was the moment where it was like, okay, this is what I needed to be doing all this time. And I had been painting full time for a while before that, for a couple of years, but it was just, I mean, just absolutely all over the place. You know, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to make it look the way I wanted it to look. And I was all over the shop. So it was CVP really that kind of had that, you know, influence to, I don't know, focus me and make me make that decision that this is what I was going to do properly all the time, every minute of every day.
Wow. I mean, you are very fairly new then to abstract world. I mean, 2015, 2016. I mean, we're talking about, you know, very few years back. And I'm wondering, even before CVP, were you just experimenting and just finding your own voice, or was it something that you just jump into and felt good and that's why you kept doing it?
I don't know. I mean, I think I'd always been attracted to abstract art, but never really made any abstract art before. I was just doing these real, you know, these life drawings, huge life drawings, you know, big charcoal, women, nudes, portraits, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, I've been making art all my life, or most of my life, but the abstract stuff not. And then I think when I first came back to making art, so all the prints that we were doing, they were all hyper realistic. I was making linos of animals for the children. So I was using, you know, the Beatrix Potter books, and I was making, like, you know, animals for the children to print. But my first thought was always realistic, you know, really lifelike stuff first. But I didn't know how to transition that into something that was more exciting for me. They just tended to be the pencil or charcoal drawings that were very realistic, and they didn't really have any personality. So I think I just had to stop it completely and just sort of stand back and kind of reapproach it completely from an abstract point of view, which I guess is a bit like me anyway. I'll either do it 150% or not at all. And then I just started the abstract thing. Yeah, like, I think it must have been about 20, because I think some of the things I don't keep much, but I kept a few paintings, and they were like some landscapes that I was trying to sort of, you know, abstract a bit or make them a bit more expressive, I suppose. And they were, I mean, just awful. I mean, just so, I mean, just like 13-year-old school project. So terrible. So I thought, okay, this isn't working. What I need to do is really go for the abstract thing and just go completely with that. I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, no, it does. I think that, you know, a lot of people that are afraid to start something new, you know, you don't find the answers right away. And people forget that, you know, it takes a long time to find your own voice and really experiment and trial and error and keep doing it. And like you said, you have to be 150 times committed to working at it, because you're not going to get it right the very first time. And if you do, you're, you know, that's non-existent in my book. But you know, were you influenced by some people or some artists then?
yes, I mean, definitely. I think I collect art books on a pretty massive scale. So I have a lot of art books.
We're gonna go into the books in a minute.
Oh,
but,
good.
Yes, because I want I love all the books that you have, and I think people will enjoy seeing what you have. But do you have any artists in mind that at that time that influenced you?
So I think through Instagram, I mean, a lot of kind of contemporary artists that I was finding. So Deborah Tarr was one of the artists. She's a British woman. She was someone that I kind of found really early on, and I just love her work ridiculously. She works really small, even though I adore massive work. Sorry, I keep having to touch the screen because it kind of keeps going there. So Deborah Tarr was someone I found quite early on. Sam Locke is an enormous influence for me. Rob Zott is a New York-based artist.
I interviewed him twice already.
Have you? I saw
Yeah.
one. Yeah, I saw one.
Yes, I love him. Yes.
He's so generous. His
Oh, so generous. Unbelievable guy. Yeah.
humble, such a
Dear
nice.
friend. Yes. Yes.
So I read his books and I ordered some of his catalogs as
Yes,
well.
me too.
In each gallery and stuff like that. I really, really enjoyed reading those. There's a French artist called Anne-Sophie Chieg, and I went completely mad and I bought one of her paintings because I love them so much. And I saw an exhibition of hers a couple of years ago and I bought a small painting of hers. So there were people that I just, kept returning to. Their work is all very different to mine, but I think you see in it, that they're mature artists. They have evolved, their voice and their message over a great length of time, I mean, decades. And they just are artists who aesthetically have found a different route, but there's something in what they've done that just spoke straight to me, like between the eyes, just this is what I want to express. I want someone else to feel this way about my work. And I want to be able to have that clarity and specificity in my work. So they were people that I would say immediately jumped to mind. Yeah.
How did you find that clarity?
I think just not letting go of it for, every waking hour of every single day for as many years as you can. Like I don't genuinely think there's, an A to B map. You just have to try as many different variations of what you're trying to do until you hit on something. And I think it's like the sort of, ever decreasing circles. You keep going round and round, and sometimes you'll do a painting and you don't really know why you made this weird offshoot. But a year later you'll go, okay, so there was something in that you just kind of, it's almost like there's a quote by a cartoonist whose name I've completely forgotten, who said something like, we've got 100,000 paintings in us. The sooner you get them out, the better. And I feel like that's the case. You just have to get all these paintings out of you until they start to make sense. The more I think about my work, the worse it goes. The more I just get on with it and finish stuff and get it out there, that's when you start to learn, I think. So I don't know if I have found any clarity yet, but whatever clarity I have found, I think is just through utter dogged persistence.
So you use more your unconsciousness and your gut than being.
Sorry, I lost that last word. Your unconscious.
Than being. So you use your unconsciousness and your gut more than using your conscious mind.
No, I wouldn't say that. No.
No. You use both?
No, I think I think you definitely have to. And I think figuring out why you choose to pursue the avenues that you pursue is critical. And I think that's very much something that's embedded within yourself. And if you choose to call it intuition, or you want to call it, sort of some sort of automatism of the way that you make certain marks or why you're attracted to certain things, I don't see it as being something that just kind of is there. I think it's a series of very conscious decisions that you make. We are faced with, innumerable experiences, visual stimuli, and what we choose from all of that stuff in our existence to put in our art, I think has been filtered a lot up here first. I don't think there's that kind of, I don't think you can make the more sophisticated, more connected art without listening to this a little bit, I think, because ultimately your intuition is born of all of those decisions. It wasn't something innate that came with you when you were born. It doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from your experience of life, and your experience of life is a sequence of decisions, ultimately. I don't know in any way what you're asking me.
Well, no, I was thinking, the way that you were talking about how you approach your painting. And so maybe, you are using your intuition, but then at the same time, when editing comes and making those choices, maybe you start your painting with your gut, but end it with your head, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's all just a sort of circular process of going around in circles, really, with that. I mean, we make certain marks, but some of those marks are born out of visual stimuli that we've already seen and processed. Sometimes they're to do with our physicality and the way that we choose to use our bodies. you know, so I make a boat shape all the time, like a sort of a U with a lid on it, sort of like a bold, you know, it's just a shape that recurs for me. But I grew up on boats. I like vessels. I like, you know, ceramics. There's lots of reasons why that particular shape is very home. It's also got an enormous history in, you know, fertility art and women's bodies, sort of big round sort of, you know, there are so many reasons that that is a shape that's culturally driven, personally driven, emotionally driven, intellectually driven. And it's a shape I return to over and over again. So, you know, where that becomes intuition or how much that becomes part of your selective brain deciding what you want to pay attention to in this world, is probably a bit both, or the same thing. I'm not sure. But I do think paying attention to what marks you make and why is really important. It might seem like an intuitive process to say, okay, I always make these little stick lines, which I do. I make them all the time. I don't tend to like horizontals very much. I like vertical, horizontal top, but in my painting, I don't tend to like horizontals. I tend to rub those out or turn the painting. I like verticals. And that's something to just pay attention to, you know, whether that's an intuition thing or a head thing. I don't know, it's probably both, probably neither. It's just something that you have to keep looking at, keep questioning and revisiting over and over again until it becomes part of a, you know, a series of hieroglyphs or marks or expressions that are you.
And finding your why is very important too.
I think finding why for sure is really important. I mean, nobody, you know, bought a painting because it was an acrylic painting on canvas. I mean, nobody bought that painting. That's a really boring sounding painting. You buy a painting because, or you want a painting in your home because it says something to you. It creates connection. It creates conversation between people.
And I'm talking more personally, you know, to find your story, to find your why, to find, you know, your purpose. I think it's very important to, you know, to know those things.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in order to have the sort of painting that's going to stop someone else in their tracks, you need to be quite sort of clear about purpose. I think why sometimes kind of confuses people because it's such a broad word. But I think the purpose of an artist is fundamental. And if you don't know it, you're not going to, in a way that others can see or be clear about.
So we have a question, but I will read it at the end of our time together here. So let's just look at some of your artwork so we know what you're talking about when you do your marks, and just tell us a little bit about what you're going to show us.
Okay, so I don't have anything that's really finished. I think there's one or two small panels that I can show you, but basically it's all work in progress currently. So I hope you'll forgive me for it all being a little bit in the middle stages.
It's all good. It's all great.
So do you want me to show you the painting that we've got donated, or just some others?
Well, we can start with that one. So you donated a piece, and this morning, just literally before the interview, it got sold for Feeding America. So we made $275 for Feeding America. That is 2,700 meals for people in need. So yay.
Wow. That is a lot of meals. That's incredible.
Yes, yes. So if you want to show that piece.
Hold it, because it's not framed yet. I tend not to finish and frame paintings until they're sold, because, you know, you get all sorts of dust in the cracks, and I like the frames and everything to look pristine. So I'll have to just sort of hold it in its tray frame. So it's a small piece. Can you see that?
Yes, yes, it is.
So it's got a sort of a bit of a matte sheen on it. I don't know if you can see that. So it's going to be framed in there, but at the moment it's just, it's on a small, it's 8 by 8 inches on a cradled panel.
Can you zoom it in, like show us more in, and can you talk a little bit about this piece in particular?
Yeah, sure. So all of my work is really an exploration of, they all start as landscapes. They all start as an external landscape. If not a landscape, then at least a sense of place. And they're overlaid really with just lots of internal landscapes, really. So I'm very interested in Chinese ceramics, Chinese lamps, lots of motifs from my childhood. I read a lot about Chinese funerary artifacts, lots of things around, you know, the most famous being Terracotta Army is something that I'm really fascinated by at the moment. So lots of symbols from Chinese funerary art. I'm also like indigo fabrics and things like that, like dyed fabrics and inks and the blues particularly. That's something that really
Yeah,
resonates.
I want to talk to you about the blues
Yeah.
because it's very obvious in your painting that your palettes are very much in the blues family. So yeah, if you want to talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it all just really goes back to this childhood thing of being in Hong Kong, these blues and whites. I think the external landscapes in Hong Kong, there's lots of these, very misty grays. I think of Hong Kong as having lots of these misty grays. It's a very humid place, very subtropical. So you get this kind of density of humidity, which hazes. So you get this soft, sort of silky gray horizon everywhere you go, particularly early mornings. And, you get that lovely, soft, diffuse light. You get it a little bit in England as well, but much less so. So having lived in Germany for the last few years, where it's got this continental type of clear air, it made me very aware of how much I love haze. So greys, soft, atmospheric greys are really, really important to me. And that does come from, I think, those years in Asia.
And
And then,
by the water and being by the water.
and being by the water, exactly. So being where there are lots of islands. And then also just the Chinese blue and white, this tradition of the blue and white, deeply entrenched from, the Qing dynasty is particularly a time when I was interested in, all the blue started to emerge in the Chinese painting of ceramics and things like that. So I've been really looking into all of that, but I think I didn't always understand why I loved and was so attracted to this blue and white thing. It's also in our family, everywhere in our house is just lots of decorative blue, lots and lots of indigo, lots of Balinese fabrics, Indonesian lamps, all that kind of stuff. So there's all this decorative stuff from my childhood, which is very present. And I live in southwest England, but you walk through the house and it's like every textile you can come across I bought in Bali or Hong Kong or somewhere. So everywhere you go, there are these, these blue and whites. They're just everywhere. So all of these kind of landscapes, they're overlaid with this visual vocabulary that I've grown up with, these blues and whites, these textures, these, I really like, these Chinese antiquity, the idea of sort of very old vases and urns and things like that. So all of that comes through, I think, in this. So there's sort of landscapey, but there's also a lot of the internal landscape expressed there.
I love your language. It transfers beautifully into your paintings. Keep showing us more if you have them, the ones that you have behind you.
We moved into this house just quite recently, and I don't have a proper studio. This is just a room in our house. So
where are you going to have your studio?
I don't know. So we just moved back to England last summer, and we're just in a rented house, and we don't know how long we're trying to buy a house, but there's nothing to buy at the moment. So I'm hoping to be able to build a studio in the garden or something like that. I don't know. But right now I don't have a proper studio. So it's just lots of kitchen table. In the summer, I can just work out in the garage, and there's loads and loads of space outside, and there's a big sort of covered area that I can work in. But it's too cold right now, so I'm just in this room downstairs that I think used to be a dining room, but I can't get paint on the walls or anything. So
are you limiting yourself on size because of that, or not necessarily?
No. So I'm working on a whole series of meter-sized paintings. I think they're 36, or is it 40? I can't remember inches. I don't really work in inches, so I always have to look at they're all kind of in progress, so let me show you what there is. I don't know.
Yes, please.
Do this. So I'll just move this chair out of the way. So this is a smaller one. So that's another piece that's a 12-inch one, and then framed, I think it's about 16 inches.
Do you like working on wood boards or canvas?
Yeah, so this is panels. So I've got loads and loads of the panels that I think through CBP, anyone who's done CBP knows that you do these series on these wooden boards. And I have like 40 of them on the go at any given time. I mean, there are just hundreds over here. Just, these are really just loads. And piles more behind here. I mean, just absolutely zillions of them.
What are your favorite materials to use?
So I use, these are all in progress. This is all very much looking at Chinese vases and these blues. So they're just quite a lot of this sort of, lots of mark making. They're not really paintings yet. I just tend to express lots and lots of marks and then start to filter which ones I'm interested in.
And do you work as a series, Bethany? Do you have them like lay down, or do you go by one? How do you start?
So that I see them all very much as a series, and I work on lots and lots of paintings at the same time. The bigger ones are my focus right now. So I use the, sorry, you can't see me. So I use the small ones as, you know, almost like sort of active sketchbooks.
Mm-hmm.
Stuck with something on a big painting, I might try out some marks on smaller panels, and then I just sand them all off, and keep going on them. And then every now and again, one of them sort of looks at me and says, "I think I might be finished," and you go, "Oh, okay." So that one's now becomes a finished painting. But I use the panels much more as sort of a tool for the bigger ones. So these are the bigger ones. Yeah, like this, for instance. These are colors that I'm working on right now. They're largely either quite blue or quite pink. So this is more in the sort of pink, atmospheric, lots of, I don't know if you can see that, there's funny light in here.
So if you move it in closer, we might be able to see it better.
So
there we go.
Can you see it better?
Yeah.
The trouble is,
do you use different brushes? What is your favorite tool, I guess?
I use a lot of these sorts of very, very wide decorators brushes. These are new, not nearly as clean as that. I use a lot of these foam thingies, you know, these foam brushes.
Yes, yes, we love them.
I tend to use extremely cheap stuff. I don't really use very expensive stuff. So I buy these, this is from an art store, I think, but they're just really the cheapest ones because I really batter them. And then lots and lots of just student quality. I mean, I treat them really badly. So I don't really, some of them I've had since art school, some of them are 25 years old, but generally these are student quality. They're not amazing, but I think they're great. And I think,
you know, the older, the more, you know, they're extensions of our lives, of our hands. And so they have so much history. So I have a really hard time getting, you know, rid of my
right.
old brushes.
Right. I know what you mean. I mean, some of those old brushes, they're so hard wearing, and you think all the paintings that they've been part of.
Yes, exactly.
I draw a lot into the paintings. I use lots of charcoal on the canvas. And that's it, really. I use a lot of emulsion paint. I really like house paint. I use a lot of that. It cracks and it sands really nicely. So I like making a lot of mess on the canvas and then sanding it back, which you can do on canvas just the same as with wood. So
do you use your hand to sand it, or do you use a sander?
No, I use a sander. I use a electric sander.
Okay. Okay.
It's just lots and lots of layers and depths, and it just creates marks that I wouldn't be able to make on my own. And before I left Germany, I had a huge studio, like 1,000 square foot, amazing custom, and it was cheap as anything. And I could do anything in there. So I was, you know, using spray paint, and I don't know, I bought a blowtorch, and I was trying to melt bits of the painting, which was brilliant. But then when we left, I'm now at home, and it does change what you can do in the house. Everything's sort of a fire hazard. Yeah. And I started in oils as well, and so I've had to go back to acrylics because I'm at home.
Right, right. So if you want to get comfortable, because I have a few more questions for you before I open the panel for questioning. I actually would love to know, how did you start really being more productive in your work, and how were you able to sell your work? And, you know, when did you start Instagram, and how were you able to build your community on Instagram? So I know it's a loaded question, but maybe we can just start from when it really clicked all for you.
So I set up my Instagram account, my professional Instagram account, in 2018. About summer 18, I think, something like that, maybe towards the end of 2018. I had a private one, but then I set up something, you know, that I could start sharing my art. And it took ages to get the first 100 followers. You know, I didn't know that there were hashtags. I didn't know anything really. And I wasn't using Instagram, you know, much before. So I was completely new to it all. My husband is in marketing and has an MBA and stuff like that. So he's really good with that stuff. So there's a lot of things that he's thrown my way. But I think I just paid attention, you know, I just started to pay attention to what people were doing, who were doing well and had nice Instagram feeds. And, you know, you just start to think, oh, you know, that doesn't look great as a grid. You know, how can I change how things are coming across? And then I think after CBP, I became very conscious that the more cohesive your art is, the easier it is to market, because your art is cohesive. It's a reflection of you. So then, you know, your brand, if you want to call that, you know, call it that, or the way that you choose to put things across just becomes easy because it's all cohesive anyway. So I think that CBP helped enormously from that point of view. And there's just so much advice out, you know, there's so much out there now. You can just read blogs, you know, find out how to make it look really, really nice. For me, I think it's about authenticity as well. It's just about making sure that you do what you think is right. I don't always love like super professional polished accounts. Some people as artists have those, and good for them. But, you know, sometimes they look like sort of style bloggers or something, and you kind of think, is there really an artist struggling behind all of that? Or is it all just like immaculate and pristine and these perfect selfies? And I don't love that myself. I prefer to see the person, you know, working and making hard decisions, and I like to see lots of works in progress. Equally, I think it shouldn't be too all over the place, you know, too sort of unprofessional. And you do sometimes see people really oversharing. You know, I don't necessarily need to know what you fed your dog for breakfast, or, you know, an update on your endometriosis, which I saw the other day.
Oh my God.
So,
Oh my God.
I'm not sure that necessarily needs to be in there, but it's something that's authentic, that just kind of speaks to you in your art journey. And I think a lot of people feel they should be doing something particular. And I think once you realize that it's an extension of you and your art, it then becomes a lot easier to do authentically. You know, if you just write, this is what I'm thinking about, and this is the like not amazing work in progress that I'm doing right now, people will go, okay, I see where you're going with that. It's not perfect, but yeah, okay, that's what it looks like at this stage.
So before we go into your books, what would be a couple of tips that you would give someone that you learned in the past 7 years that have gotten you to where you are today, successful? You're a mentor to so many artists. What would you say to help others get to where you are?
I think the most important thing is that the art always comes first. People forget this. They get all carried away in all the silly stuff and the things and all the stuff that they should be doing and all the marketing and the worrying about pricing and the framing and the, you know, this person's doing this thing that I'm not doing. Most of the time when people come to me and say, you know, I'm having this difficulty where my work's not selling or whatever, I mean, I think 9 times out of 10 you can say, or 99 times out of 100 even, you can just say, go back to the work. If the work is good, most of the other stuff will start to fall into place. I mean, yes, we have to make decisions around how to present our work or how to market it, that sort of thing. But it always has to come from good work. If your work is good and you are putting everything you can into your work, finding out why you make your work, how is your work different from anybody else's, this is the juice that will make your art move forward of its own accord. Otherwise, you're going to be pushing an elephant up the stairs for the rest of your life, trying to think, why is this so hard? If you find that thing within your art, everything else comes from that. I don't know if that's clear, but I think the art has to come.
Oh, it's so clear. It's loud and clear, and could not have answered that any better. So thank you for that. That was amazing. So I'm going to ask you to show us the books that you have. And then you're going to send me some pictures, and I'm going to post a story with all your books so everybody can know, because I don't have the titles with me now, but we will get them to you, because I know that you're going to ask me for all the books that Bethany's going to share with us now.
Okay, well, I've got a whole pile of them here. I mean, these are the books that I'm reading. I'm not necessarily saying that these are books that you should go out and buy because they're so amazing. They're just the books that I happen to be reading. So I showed this already. This is Looking at Modern Art. This is a much more, it's a much newer reflection of modern art since around Picasso, basically. And it's written by a woman. So there's a lot of stuff in there that has been omitted for a long time. So your Gombrich and your, you know, Story of Art and all those seminal texts.
Oh, I love that. We
need to update some of our ideas. Bauhaus, amazing, especially if you're a bit wobbly on colour, as I am, always. I'm very keen on Albers and the whole Bauhaus movement.
Me too. I love Bauhaus. Yes.
Yeah. I think it's just a great one to always come back to. And this is a really boring book. It doesn't really have great pictures. I always feel embarrassed saying that, but you know, we're artists. We basically pictures. So it's more of a ready book than a looking at the pictures book. But it's just, it's something that I always come back to. I think the whole philosophy of Bauhaus is amazing. So I look at that a lot. This is probably my most favorite book currently.
Indigo. There you go.
Love this book. I haven't really read very much of it, but again, it's just pictures are amazing. And it's just an absolutely beautiful coffee table book on the whole history of indigo, how it's used, the process of it. It's just one of those beautiful, glossy, lovely, seductive books. And it never fails to just make me feel like running into the studio and mixing up another batch of.
God, I love that so much.
Beautiful, this lovely, oh, I just could sit here for hours. I just love all these patterns. It's just such a good book. I haven't read lots of it, I'm going to have to admit. So it's Indigo, the Colour That Changed the World.
Perfect.
Favorite book in the world right now. This is one I'm reading. This is in German, but you can get it in English. It's a book about Hokusai. A lot of Hokusai's work interests me because of the colours that Hokusai used. There's lots of this sort of blues and rusty reds. So I'm very interested in those sorts of things. I mean, we all know about like the wave and, you know, his sort of very famous prints, yes, which I love, but they're not as interesting to me as the drawings and the sketches. Some of these very simple plates I just find very beautiful. I absolutely love those. They're a real lesson in discipline and restraint. And then there's a few more. Lee Krasner, another absolute favourite of mine. I think we all love the abstract expressionist movement are just phenomenal. Love. Just love. And there's a exhibition up in London currently, which I finally went to see, of her prints, and it's just reinforced.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
Yeah, and not all the big sort of massive colour field works, but they're prints and just amazing and so big for prints. I mean, some of them are, you know, 4 foot by 6 foot.
Wow.
Print, and you're like, how did you print this stuff? I don't know. I also love Lee Krasner, and I think you know, she was just so ahead of her time. Some of the stuff was just so cool, like her use of colour is so bananas.
The patterns, the use of color, the repetition of, you know, of it's incredible. I could go on and on her.
Mark making, the repetition of mark making, and just, you know, I think the range of work that she was making. I mean, gosh, look at her early work. I mean, she was doing very stuff, you know. And
that'd be you, Bethany.
Yeah, like me. I mean, gosh, you know, all these nudes. I think we just feel so much pressure to be one thing, and we're rarely one thing as human beings. We're all lots of different things, and you know, I think artists and having a sort of the kind of book that shows you their whole career, it does make you realize that we have phases, and that's okay. We don't have to be, you know, an abstract artist who makes those blue paintings. And, you know, I've just ordered lots of clay, so I might go back to sculpture for a bit. So it's just kind of giving me that permission to.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe one more?
Yeah. So this is a Joan Eardley book. I don't know if you know her. She's a Scottish artist.
No, I don't know.
So very weirdly, she did these very beautiful, very serene landscapes, and then really creepy drawings of children, like really creepy ones. So this is quite a famous piece of hers. So she did these were very bucolic English scenes and Scottish scenes.
Wow.
But then she also did these like super creepy pictures of children that I don't really love at all. So it was very weird. She had this sort of like I don't know, the sort of
well, maybe two personalities happening.
super weird.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to open up for questions, and we
Yeah.
do have a couple ones that I'm going to read to you. Do you find using panels good for certain sizes of work versus using canvases? And do you find some sizes require or easier to handle on canvas versus board?
Yeah, definitely. The main issue being weight. Panels just get so heavy. And because I work on a lot of stuff at the same time, I just think maneuvering enormous, 3-4 foot cradled panels is just, it's too much. I can't do it. Whereas canvases are so light. The other thing is that it depends where you live. I don't think here we're in a huge danger of canvases, panels warping. But I think if you live anywhere with any kind of humidity, you have to pay attention to really robust cradling, and checking that they don't warp, because whereas with the canvas itself won't warp. The stretchers might warp, but then you just take them off the stretchers and re-stretch them. So I think they're the two main things to pay attention to. I tend to work very small on panel because you can just stack up hundreds of little panels and just use them and sand on them, which I think is great.
Okay, the second one is, how do you work on all the pieces in small spaces? I feel so restricted by not having space.
I think you do the best with what you have, and that's it. Being a great artist is not about having all the money and all the time and all the space and, all the ideas and all the access. No, it's about having what you have, and then you do what you can with what you have. So if I want to do a giant painting in a small room, you just do that. And, it's
right. Okay. How much time do you spend reflecting on your work, or do you have any kind of structure to give yourself time for reflection? Do your work start to finish with your work, or do you take breaks and then come back to it and see how you feel or think about it?
So I work in very short bursts of like 15, 20 minutes, no more. And I tend to know what I'm doing in advance.
Okay. I'm going to ask you 3 questions. What media do you use, acrylic, ink, or others? Do you sand your canvases? And how do you see your own art evolving? How has it changed over the past 3 years?
Okay, so the first one was I use acrylic mostly. I do use oils, but not at the moment because it's winter and they take too long to dry, and I'm at home. The second one was, do I sand? I've forgotten. Do I sand?
Canvases.
Yeah.
You sand your canvases.
100%. You have to be very careful. I put my hand on the back, and then you just have to really sort of just be careful with how deep you go. But yes, I do. There was another one in there before.
How do you see yourself evolving in your art? How has it changed over the past 3 years or so?
I definitely think the process is more reflective. I've become more aware of what I'm trying to achieve. I think for a long time about the visual, like the aesthetics, whereas now I think I'm trying to deepen my practice in terms of the ideas behind what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make it more personal, I think.
What are your favorite blues? And do you mix your blues?
Yes and no. So indigo definitely is my absolute go-to. I probably own all of the types of indigo that are available and just experiment, but I don't make them from pigment. It's a stage that doesn't interest me at all. I think it's an amazing thing if you can do it, but I don't have the time. So I'm happy to buy.
Do you ever put paper collage on your canvases, and has it been successful?
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Do you use paper collage on your canvases, and has it been successful?
I always used to, but I stopped doing it. I don't like doing it. It's too, I like canvas too much. So I stopped. I prefer canvas to paper.
Okay. Do you paint on, when you do paint on canvas, is it already stretched or unstretched?
A bit of both. I've been using bought canvases much more, just for practicality, because I just don't have loads of time. But I have got all the stretchers and I've got all the stuff to do it. So I need to start doing that really, because it's just better, I think.
If Bethany doesn't have a job to go to, how many hours does she spends in her studio?
I absolutely have a job to go to. It's called being an artist, and I do that full time.
And have children.
And I have two children, so I work
Do you use oil sticks with your acrylic paint, or how do you seal it?
oil stick. And are they different questions? Sorry, I'm trying.
Yeah, if you're using oil sticks, different question. Do you use oil sticks at all, I guess?
Sometimes, yeah, I do use oil sticks. Yeah, they're less and less, but yes, I do. And how do I seal? Did you say was the other one?
If you seal them, I guess, with it, or you finish it with them. But
The oil is that?
yes, yes.
No, I don't do anything particular. I just seal the whole painting at the end, but I wouldn't know, not really.
I'm gonna have a couple more here. My small paintings always look different than my large pieces. It's so frustrating. Have this ever happened to you?
I'm sorry, it keeps. I keep losing you. What was the last?
Sorry. If you start with your small paintings when you as a sketch, and then you go into a bigger painting and it doesn't look like that, do you feel frustrated by that, or
No, I don't.
how do you handle that?
I don't do that at all. I see each expression on every substrate as being a separate and unique event. I don't try and translate one onto the other. I practice one motion many times or one mark many times, but each mark is an event entirely of its own self.
And what is your editing process?
Editing, sorry, I don't know what you mean.
Your editing process at the end when you're done, where you're finishing, you know, your painting, and how do you decide how to finish your painting, how to edit your painting at the end?
I mean, editing is painting. It's all part of the painting process. It's not that you paint something and then edit it. You know, it's a constant evolution of more marks, then reducing it, more marks, and reducing it, more marks, and reducing it. So it's an integral part of the painting process. I wouldn't say there's a stage at the end where I suddenly decide to sort of pull it back or something. It reaches a point where it has a design and something that is working for me. Then I might start to, you know, think about formal elements, like does it need a little bit of dark here to bring your eye up there, or does it need to simplify this or group some values together? But that's something that I do from the very early stages onwards. It's part of the whole process.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. So Bethany, where can we find you? Where can we find your work?
So BethanyKohrt.com would be the place to go, or on Instagram, I'm BethanyKohrt_artist.
So I cannot thank you enough for coming here today and opening up to all of us. You gave us so much food for thought, and I can't thank you enough for an incredible interview. And I just want to take this opportunity to let you all know that I'm taking a personal break of 2 months. So I'll be back on April 30th with Tap Into Your Creativity. So thank you so much, Bethany. We'll be in touch, and please, I guess I'll text you right after the interview. But thank you again to our collector, and for you for, you know, donating your beautiful piece of art.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it. I hope I answered all your questions.
Yes, I mean, we probably didn't go through all of them, but we're over an hour, and it's crazy. It goes so fast. So we might have a part 2, Bethany. So Stay tuned, everyone. And thank you again. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Sandra. Bye, everyone.
Bye.